The 50 most famous artworks by Salvador Dalí. Number 50. Raphaelesque Head Exploding. 1951. In 1951, Salvador Dalí introduced the world to his work, Raphaelesque Head Exploding, a painting that symbolizes his transition to a more scientific and mystical stage of his career. Inspired by Renaissance art, particularly the figures of Raphael, this work combines classical virtuosity with elements of disruptive modernism. The 20th century saw the rise of artistic movements that challenged traditional norms, and this piece stands out as a paradigmatic example of how Dalí reinterpreted tradition through the lens of surrealism. Technically, this work is a display of Dalí's technical mastery of oil painting. The composition is structured by geometric fragments that seem to float in space, representing the deconstruction of an idealized head. The shapes explode from a central core, creating a sense of perpetual movement. The color palette, dominated by warm, earthy tones, lends an almost religious atmosphere, elevating the image to a spiritual plane. This fragmented approach reflects his interest in atomic physics, a recurring theme in his work during this period. The relevance of this painting in Dalí's career lies in its ability to fuse the teachings of the past with modern concerns. Through this piece, the artist seeks to reconcile art and science, uniting the tangible and intangible in a visual representation. This painting was exhibited in several international museums, consolidating Dalí as a visionary who could transform abstract concepts into striking images. Interestingly, Dalí claimed that this work symbolized his fascination with the mystery of creation and destruction, a theme he believed was not only applicable to art, but to existence itself. The exploding Raphaelesque head remains one of the most intriguing pieces in his oeuvre, challenging viewers to decipher its hidden meaning. Number 49. Sacred Heart. 1962. In 1962, Salvador Dalí surprised the public with his work, Sacred Heart, a painting that encapsulates his fascination with religious mysticism and his ability to reinvent universal symbols. In the 20th century, an era marked by secularization and the rise of scientific thought, Dalí took up Christian iconography with a contemporary and deeply personal approach. The work features a burning heart, surrounded by luminous halos and dynamic brushstrokes that evoke a spiritual ecstasy. Unlike traditional depictions of the heart of Jesus, Dalí introduces surrealist elements, such as distorted figures and textures that seem to melt into the canvas. The oil technique and energetic strokes reflect his mastery in capturing intense and transcendent emotions. Light plays a crucial role in the composition, emanating from the center of the heart and expanding towards the edges, symbolizing the divinity that radiates into the world. This painting is a testament to the influence of religion in Dalí's life, especially during his period of nuclear mysticism. In his quest to reconcile modern science with spirituality, Dalí used this work to explore the connection between the human and the divine. First exhibited in Paris, the painting generated controversy for its disruptive approach to a sacred subject, but it was also hailed as an act of profound artistic introspection. A fascinating detail is that Dalí claimed to have had a vision that inspired this work while he was meditating in front of the sea. In his own words, this experience connected him with the essence of the universe, becoming the creative spark for the Sacred Heart. Today, this work continues to be studied as a bridge between traditional art and modern surrealism. Number 48. The Swallow's Tail. 1983. In 1983, Salvador Dalí presented the world with The Swallow's Tail, considered his last great work before his retirement from the art scene. This painting, which belongs to the 20th century, encapsulates decades of experimentation and artistic evolution, showing a more introspective and philosophical Dalí. Inspired by René Thom's mathematical theories on catastrophes, the artist translated abstract concepts into a visual composition loaded with symbolism. The painting is characterized by its minimalist yet striking approach. Undulating lines and curvilinear shapes dominate the scene, evoking the graceful movement of a swallow's tail in flight. Dalí uses vibrant colors, such as blue and yellow, to create a contrast that highlights the fluidity of the forms. This technical approach demonstrates his ability to simplify complexity without losing visual depth. Significant to Dalí's career as one of his last works, The Swallow's Tail reflects his interest in connecting aesthetics with mathematics and natural sciences. It is a final statement that encapsulates his legacy as an artist who blurred the boundaries between art and other disciplines. A fascinating fact is that Dalí considered this work to be a summary of his entire artistic life. According to him, the swallow's tail symbolized the perfect balance between chaos and order, a theme that permeated his entire production. This work, although less known than others, is a testament to his creative genius until the end. Number 47. The Invisible Man. From 1929 to 1932 AD. Between 1929 and 1932, Salvador Dalí created The Invisible Man, a work that encapsulates the essence of surrealism in the 20th century. Painted during a period of great artistic experimentation, this painting combines elements of reality and imagination in a composition that challenges the viewer to question their perception. The technique used by Dalí in this work is exceptionally detailed. Layers of superimposed images and hidden figures create a visual effect that changes depending on the observer's perspective. Using earthy colors and dark tones, the painting reflects an enigmatic atmosphere that invites introspection. Meticulous details, such as faces emerging from abstract landscapes, show Dalí's ability to manipulate perception and play with ambiguity. The Invisible Man is a crucial work in Dalí's career because it marks his consolidation as one of the leaders of the surrealist movement. It was exhibited in several galleries in Europe and America, generating debates about the limits of art and interpretation. This painting remains a favorite among surrealism scholars for its complexity and symbolic depth. A curious aspect is that Dalí never fully explained the meaning of this work, leaving each viewer to find their own interpretation. This enigma has contributed to its fame, making it one of the most discussed pieces in his collection. Number 46. Tuna Fishing. 1967. In 1967, Salvador Dalí presented Tuna Fishing, a monumental work that combines the drama of action with the depth of symbolism. This painting, which belongs to the 20th century, is a tribute to the Mediterranean tradition and to the cycles of life and death, recurring themes in Dalí's work. The painting is a display of movement and energy. Human figures and fish intertwine in a chaotic dance that captures the intensity of fishing. Vibrant colors, such as red and blue, dominate the composition, creating a visual contrast that accentuates the sense of dynamism. Dalí uses superimposition techniques and aggressive brushstrokes to convey the struggle between man and nature. Tuna fishing is significant in Dalí's career because it represents a synthesis of his surrealist approach and his interest in classical mythology. This work was enthusiastically received by critics and collectors, further consolidating his position as one of the most influential artists of his time. An interesting detail is that Dalí claimed that this painting symbolized the human being's internal struggle to find meaning in a chaotic world. Through this work, the artist explored the connections between the physical and the spiritual, leaving a legacy that continues to fascinate generations of viewers. Number 45. The Three Sphinxes of Bikini. 1947. The Three Sphinxes of Bikini is one of the most fascinating works of the 20th century, created in 1947 by the famous Salvador Dalí. This painting comes from a period marked by the global impact of nuclear testing carried out on the Bikini Atoll, located in the Pacific Ocean, an event that transformed the world's perception of nuclear energy. The work, belonging to the surrealist movement, captures the mixture of fascination and fear that humanity felt towards scientific advances and their destructive potential in the period after World War II. In this painting, Dalí uses his signature symbolism to create a bleak and tense environment. Three figures dominate the composition: two human sphinxes and a central one, which seems to emerge as an anthropomorphic form from nature. The color palette, dominated by muted, earthy tones, reflects a devastated landscape, while soft textures contrast with the sharp details of the central figures. This work represents a meditation on the effects of atomic destruction, encapsulated in the dreamlike atmosphere that characterizes surrealism. For Dalí, this painting not only marked a critique of war and its consequences, but also represented his evolution towards more universal and metaphysical themes. Throughout his career, the artist explored the limits of reality and dream, but with The Three Sphinxes of Bikini, he achieved a balance between psychological exploration and social denunciation. Its precise technique and its ability to convey complex emotions make this piece a milestone in his artistic career. As a unique detail, the work also alludes to the duality of nuclear power, capable of creating energy but also unleashing devastation. This painting remains relevant as it recalls the impacts of human experiments on the environment and the constant conflict between progress and ethics. Number 44. Atomic Melancholy and Uranic Idolatry. 1945. Atomic Melancholy and Uranian Idolatry, painted by Salvador Dalí in 1945, reflects the artist's deep concern in the face of the dizzying changes brought about by the end of World War II. During this period, humanity found itself at a crossroads between scientific progress and the existential threat posed by nuclear energy, symbolized in this work by a desolate landscape full of dreamlike elements. The composition is a visual symphony of floating fragments, tense human figures, and abstract forms evoking decomposing particles. Dalí's technical precision is evident in the meticulousness of every detail, from the ethereal textures to the light contrasts that accentuate the feeling of emptiness and isolation. The predominant colors, which range from ochre to deep blue, intensify the feeling of melancholy and reflect a world that seems to be on the verge of collapse. This work is also a philosophical exploration of the idolatry of science and technological advancements. Dalí uses symbols of fragmented deities to represent how humanity, in its quest for power and knowledge, risks destroying itself. This painting marked a turning point in his work, as he began to incorporate more introspective and spiritual themes, in contrast to his earlier, more experimental works. The title itself evokes a dichotomy: the melancholy of what is lost versus the adoration of what is new and unknown. This balance between admiration and warning makes Melancholia Atomica y Uranica Idolatry a piece that continues to resonate in a world where the ethical implications of science are a recurring theme. Number 43. The Spectre of Sex Appeal. 1934. The Spectre of Sex Appeal, painted in 1934, is one of Salvador Dalí's first works in which he deeply explores the theme of the human psyche and desire. This painting, developed at the height of surrealism, reflects the artist's interest in Freudian theories of the unconscious and its influence on the most intimate desires and fears. The painting features a grotesque and fragmented central figure, seemingly emerging from a surreal desert landscape. Warm, sandy colors contrast with the cool tones that outline the contours of the spectrum, creating an atmosphere charged with psychological tensions. Dalí uses distortion to capture the idea of how desire can be both alluring and disturbing, a duality reflected in the organic forms and symbolic elements. In the context of Dalí's work, this painting represents a move towards depicting more personal and introspective themes. The title, which alludes to physical attractiveness, becomes a visual irony by showing a figure that, far from being desirable, is disturbing. This contrast underlines Dalí's ability to explore the contradictions inherent in human beings. An interesting detail is how the work anticipates themes that Dalí would later develop, such as the relationship between body, mind, and environment. The specter of sex appeal remains a key piece in understanding the painter's artistic and philosophical evolution. Number 42. Imperial Monument to the Woman-Child. 1929. Imperial Monument to the Woman-Child, created in 1929, is one of Salvador Dalí's most iconic works during his early period in surrealism. This painting encapsulates his fascination with childhood, lost innocence, and the transformation into adulthood, recurring themes in his artistic production. The composition combines architectural elements with human figures that seem to float in a dreamlike space. Precise lines and intense colors, such as red and gold, highlight the theatricality of the scene. Dalí creates a contrast between the monumentality of the architectural elements and the fragility of the central figure, represented as a girl who seems about to fade away in her surroundings. This work is a testament to how Dalí experimented with the limits of perception and memory. Inspired by Freud's psychoanalytic theories, the artist uses this monument as a symbolic representation of childhood memories and the emotional conflicts that emerge in the process of maturity. A fascinating aspect of the painting is how it manages to capture the tension between the monumental and the ephemeral, reflecting the fragility of the human condition. This balance makes Imperial Monument to the Woman-Child a work full of meaning and visual beauty. Number 41. Landscape near Figueras. 1910. Landscape near Figueras, created in 1910, is one of the first documented works by Salvador Dalí when he was still a young artist in training. In this oil painting, we can see a lesser-known side of the painter, who would later become an icon of surrealism. At this stage, his work was more influenced by Impressionism and the landscapes of his native Catalonia. The painting shows a peaceful pastoral scene, with rolling hills and clear skies evoking the bucolic charm of the region near Figueras, where Dalí was born. The soft colors and delicate brushstrokes display a traditional technique that contrasts markedly with the style that would define his career in later years. This painting is significant because it captures not only the technical prowess of a young Dalí, but also his emotional connection to his homeland. Despite the simplicity of the subject, there is a certain air of melancholy in the composition, which can be interpreted as a premonition of the symbolism that would dominate his more mature work. An intriguing detail is how Dalí, even in his early period, demonstrates a remarkable sensitivity to light and color, characteristics that would evolve into much more complex forms in his later works. Landscape near Figueras is a window into the beginnings of a budding genius, before he fully embraced the surrealist currents that would consecrate him as one of the most influential artists of the 20th century. Number 40. The Great Paranoid. 1936. In 1936, in the middle of the 20th century, Salvador Dalí created the Great Paranoic, a work that encapsulates his immersion in the paranoid critical method characteristic of surrealism. In this oil on canvas, Dalí manages to fuse his keen psychological perception with astonishing technical mastery. The work presents a complex composition where faces and figures emerge from an amalgam of seemingly abstract forms, forcing the viewer to interpret and reinterpret each element. This technique, a result of his exploration of multiple perceptions, reinforces the idea that reality is shaped by the subconscious. In the context of the 1930s, Europe was gripped by political and cultural tensions that profoundly influenced Dalí. The rise of Freudian psychoanalysis and surrealist theories offered a framework for challenging conventional norms of art. The Great Paranoid reflects this time of intellectual effervescence, showing how Dalí challenged traditional boundaries of perception and sought to capture the very essence of human emotions, hidden behind layers of symbolism and complexity. Technically, the work stands out for its palette of warm and cool colors, which intertwine to create an atmosphere of mystery and tension. The precision in the details is a demonstration of Dalí's virtuosity, who uses meticulous brushstrokes to construct a dreamlike, almost tangible world. This painting is also a testament to his fascination with the human brain and its ability to generate symbolic images from chaos. When looking at the Great Paranoid, it is impossible not to admire how Dalí manages to invite the viewer into a constant dialogue with the work. Each glance reveals new hidden elements, a characteristic that defines his legacy as one of the greatest exponents of surrealism. This painting remains a masterpiece that fascinates and disconcerts in equal measure. Number 39. Galas Foot, 1931. In 1931, Salvador Dalí presented Galas Foot, a work that combines his love for Gala, his muse and wife, with his exploration of human desires and fetishes. This painting, created during one of the most creative periods of the 20th century, reveals Dalí's interest in anatomical details and emotional connections. The piece focuses on a foot, which becomes a surrealist cult object, and the title reflects his fascination with Gala as a central figure in his life and art. The work was created at a time when Dalí was establishing himself as one of the most prominent figures of surrealism. In these years, artists were exploring the boundaries of reality and fantasy, and Dalí was no exception. Galas Foot shows how he used everyday items to create images that defied logic, immersing the viewer in a world of free associations and personal symbolism. From a technical point of view, the work stands out for its exquisite realism. The texture of the skin and the anatomical representation are so precise that they border on the photographic, which contrasts with the surreal context in which it is inserted. The composition of the painting is designed to draw the viewer's attention to the foot, elevating it from a simple object to a symbol of devotion and desire. Although it may seem like a simple work compared to Dalí's other more elaborate creations, Galas Foot encapsulates the essence of his obsession with Gala and his ability to transform the ordinary into the extraordinary. This painting remains a reminder of how love and art are intertwined in his work. Number 38. Portrait of Mae West, which can be used as a surrealist apartment. From 1934 to 1935. Between 1934 and 1935, Salvador Dalí developed one of his most iconic works, Portrait of Mae West, that can be used as a surrealist apartment. This painting, conceived at the height of surrealism, is a masterful example of how Dalí fused art, design, and architecture into a single piece. Inspired by the famous actress Mae West, the work transforms her face into a living space, where her lips become a sofa and her eyes become windows. The historical context of this work is crucial to understanding its significance. During this decade, Hollywood was consolidating itself as the epicenter of entertainment, and Dalí, always fascinated by popular culture, found in Mae West the perfect icon to explore the connections between art and mass consumption. This portrait not only celebrates a figure of cinema, but also underlines Dalí's ingenuity in transforming an actress into a functional design object. From a technical perspective, the work combines precise perspective with elements of optical illusion. Dalí uses vibrant colors and careful composition to create an image that is both a portrait and an architectural space. The meticulousness of detail is evident, especially in the representation of the textures that define each element. Beyond its technical ingenuity, this painting symbolizes Dalí's ability to reimagine reality. Portrait of Mae West is a reminder of how art can transcend traditional categories, blending painting, architecture, and design into a truly unique creation. Number 37. The Enigma of Desire, 1929. In 1929, Salvador Dalí painted The Enigma of Desire, one of his most introspective and psychological works. Created at the height of surrealism, this painting explores the artist's relationship with his mother and the repressed desires that form part of the unconscious. The work shows a desert landscape, dominated by a large anthropomorphic figure covered in inscriptions that allude to maternal love, a recurring theme in Dalí's work. The year 1929 was a key one in the artist's life, as it marked his official incorporation into the Surrealist movement and the beginning of his relationship with Gala. In this context, The Enigma of Desire reflects a moment of personal and professional transition. The work is deeply symbolic, with elements that evoke the fragility of human relationships and the fears that haunt each individual. Technically, Dalí employs a palette of earthy colors that contrast with the brighter tones of the inscriptions. The precision in detail and texture demonstrates his ability to create dreamlike worlds with almost photographic clarity. Each element of the painting seems carefully placed to invite the viewer to decipher its multiple meanings. The Enigma of Desire is notable not only for its artistic quality, but also for its ability to evoke deep emotions. The work remains a testament to how Dalí used art to confront his own internal conflicts, creating a legacy that continues to inspire generations of artists and viewers. Number 36. Soft Self-Portrait with Fried Bacon, 1941. In 1941, in the midst of World War II, Salvador Dalí created Soft Self-Portrait with Fried Bacon, a work that reflects his fascination with the duality between flesh and spirit. More conceptual than literal, this self-portrait shows his deformed face, supported by crutches, and accompanied by pieces of fried bacon, an element that symbolizes both the pleasure and the decadence of human existence. The historical context in which this work is set is crucial. War was transforming the world, and Dalí used his art to explore the tensions between human fragility and resilience. Soft Self-Portrait with Fried Bacon is a meditation on personal and collective vulnerability, and a subtle critique of excess and banality in times of crisis. Technically, the work stands out for its use of contrasting textures. The bacon, painted with an almost tactile realism, contrasts with the softness of the face and the surreal background. The crutches, a recurring motif in Dalí's work, reinforce the idea of support and dependence, underlining the precariousness of the human condition. This work, though less well-known than Dalí's other works, encapsulates his ability to transform the personal into the universal. Soft Self-Portrait with Fried Bacon is an example of how surrealism can be deeply introspective, revealing both the artist's fears and aspirations in an ever-changing world. Number 35. The Enigma of William Tell. 1933. In 1933, The Enigma of William Tell was created by Salvador Dalí, a work that mixes surrealism with a deeply symbolic interpretation of the Swiss myth of William Tell. The historical context of its creation was the beginning of the 1930s, a time marked by political tensions and cultural transformations in Europe, especially with the rise of authoritarian regimes. Dalí lived in a period of artistic transition, in which he explored the concepts of the subconscious and psychological structures, which is intensely reflected in this painting. The work presents a masterful technical combination, where Dalí uses oil on canvas to capture a scene that defies the laws of logic. William Tell is represented as a grotesque, almost deformed figure, holding an apple in an act that evokes both heroism and tension. The colors are cold, with a predominance of blue and gray tones, which generates an eerie atmosphere. The precision in the details, such as the texture of the objects and the expressions of the characters, demonstrates Dalí's technical ability to create dreamlike worlds that defy traditional perception. This painting is one of the most significant pieces in Dalí's career because it reflects his critical view of authoritarian figures and oppressive power, themes that marked his work during this period. In addition, its symbolism has been interpreted as an exploration of the artist's relationship with his own father, with whom he had a complex and conflictive relationship. This emotional background adds a layer of depth that transcends mere visual representation, making the work a significant piece within the surrealist movement. A curious fact about this painting is the way Dalí plays with the notion of balance and tension, using seemingly incoherent elements to keep the viewer in a state of constant reflection. This approach highlights his ability to transform a well-known myth into an exploration of the limits of the subconscious and human emotions. Number 34. The Last Supper. 1955. In 1955, Salvador Dalí presented his interpretation of The Last Supper, a tribute to the iconic biblical moment, but with a surrealist approach that fuses spirituality with symbolism. This year marked a period of religious renewal in Dalí's work, influenced by the return of mystical themes and his fascination with mathematics and divine proportion. Post-war Europe was in a process of moral and spiritual reconstruction, making this work resonate deeply with contemporary audiences. In this piece, Dalí uses the oil-on-canvas technique with extraordinary geometric precision. The composition focuses on a transparent table, surrounded by ethereal figures representing Christ and his disciples, with a seascape in the background evoking a heavenly atmosphere. The light, luminous colors contrast with subtle shadows that emphasize three-dimensionality, while the central figure of Christ is enveloped by a dodecahedron, a symbol of perfection and eternity. This use of geometric shapes reflects the influence of mathematical theories in Dalí's work. The significance of this work lies in how Dalí manages to reinterpret a traditional theme with a completely modern language. While maintaining recognizable elements of the biblical story, he transforms them into a visual meditation on faith, eternity, and the cosmos. His approach not only marked a significant change in his artistic career, but also generated controversy by challenging conventional representations of religious themes. A fascinating aspect of this painting is the inclusion of transparent and ethereal elements, which symbolize spiritual transcendence and the connection between the divine and the earthly. This seemingly simple detail captures the essence of a timeless message about the search for the eternal. Number 33. The Battle of Tiwan. 1962. In 1962, Salvador Dalí presented his monumental work, The Battle of Tiwan, inspired by the historical conflict between Spain and Morocco that occurred in the 19th century. This painting not only recalls a war event, but transforms it into a visual spectacle that mixes history, surrealism, and symbolism. During this period, Dalí explored historical themes reinterpreted through his characteristic dreamlike style, in a global context marked by the Cold War and debates about cultural identity. The oil on canvas is notable for its chaotic and vibrant composition. Dalí depicts the battle as a whirlwind of figures, with soldiers, horses, and weapons in motion, all stylized with a surrealist approach that defies spatial logic. Warm colors, such as reds and oranges, are combined with darker tones to convey the intensity of combat. Every detail, from the uniforms to the facial expressions, showcases Dalí's technical mastery and his ability to capture both action and emotion. This work is a testament to Dalí's ability to transform a historical event into a unique visual experience. Beyond the depiction of battle, the painting becomes an exploration of violence, chaos, and glory. The inclusion of symbolic elements, such as distorted clocks and ghostly figures, adds layers of meaning that invite the viewer to reflect on the nature of conflict and historical memory. An intriguing detail about this work is how Dalí incorporates surrealist elements into a historical subject, creating an experience that transcends time and space. This innovative approach establishes a bridge between the past and the present, offering a unique perspective on humanity and its struggles. Number 32. Portrait of Pablo Picasso, 1947. In 1947, Salvador Dalí paid homage to his compatriot and colleague Pablo Picasso with Portrait of Pablo Picasso, a work that combines respect for his artistic genius with Dalí's characteristic irony. This portrait was created in a period when both artists dominated the international art scene, although their styles and philosophies were diametrically opposed. Dalí used this painting as a statement of both admiration and criticism towards Cubism and Picasso's career. The work, done in oil on canvas, presents Picasso as a semi-abstract figure, surrounded by symbolic elements that represent his artistic legacy and influence in the art world. Vibrant colors, such as yellows, blues, and greens, contrast with distorted shapes that evoke the Cubist style. Dalí incorporates surreal details, such as clocks and crumbling structures, which allude to his own artistic vision and the tension between the two creators. This portrait is significant because it encapsulates the complex relationship between Dalí and Picasso, marked by a mix of admiration and competition. At the same time, the work serves as a visual dialogue between surrealism and cubism, two fundamental movements in modern art. The inclusion of personal symbols adds an introspective dimension, turning the portrait into a commentary on identity and artistic legacy. One notable element is how Dalí uses the figure of Picasso as a means to explore the intersection between realism and abstraction, a recurring theme in his work. This innovative approach reaffirms his position as one of the most daring and original artists of his time. Number 31. Living Still Life, 1956. In 1956, Salvador Dalí created Living Still Life, a work that redefined the classic still life genre through his signature surrealist language. This painting reflects his fascination with science, especially atomic theory, which significantly influenced his art during this decade. The painting emerges in a context where humanity was reflecting on scientific advances and their implications, marking a period of transition between the traditional and the modern. The oil on canvas depicts a dynamic composition, with everyday objects such as fruit, glasses, and tables appearing to float in a state of decay or transformation. Vibrant colors and precise details bring the objects to life, while shadows and reflections add a sense of depth and movement. Dalí combines meticulous realism with dreamlike elements, creating an atmosphere that seems to defy the laws of physics. This work is an outstanding example of how Dalí transforms a traditional subject into a visual exploration of scientific and philosophical concepts. His innovative approach not only challenges the viewer's expectations, but also redefines the meaning of still life as an artistic genre. The inclusion of dynamic and surreal elements reinforces his reputation as one of the leading visionaries of modern art. A fascinating detail is how Dalí manages to convey the idea of energy and movement through a static composition. This technical and conceptual achievement reaffirms his ability to innovate within the boundaries of artistic tradition, leaving a lasting impression on art history. Number 30. Vermeer's Ghost from Delft that can be used as a table. 1934. In the context of the 1930s, surrealism dominated much of the art scene, and Salvador Dalí emerged as a key figure in this movement. This work, created in 1934, reflects the artist's fascination with mixing the everyday with the dreamlike. Inspired by the Dutch master Johannes Vermeer, Dalí reinterpreted his legacy with a surrealist vision that challenges conventional notions of art. The central figure, resembling a spectre, is a direct allusion to Vermeer's technical mastery, but reinterpreted with the distortions and metaphors that characterize Dalí's work. Technically, this painting stands out for its almost sculptural structure and its ingenious use of chiaroscuro. Dalí fuses recognizable elements, such as the table that supports the spectre, with amorphous forms and desolate landscapes that evoke a dreamlike state. The ambiguous space and deep shadows invite the viewer to explore the symbolic layers of the work, which can be interpreted as a meditation on the fragility of time and the eternity of art. In the context of Dalí's career, this work marked a crucial moment in his consolidation within the Surrealist movement. His ability to reimagine historical figures and transform them into elements of his own artistic language positioned him as one of the great innovators of the 20th century. The reference to Vermeer, whose work was marked by its meticulous attention to detail, underlines Dalí's admiration for the masters of the past, albeit reinterpreted from a completely modern perspective. Interestingly, the work can also be interpreted as a commentary on functionality and art, as Dalí plays with the idea of turning a figure into a utilitarian object. This concept of transformation was a constant in his work, and here it is presented in a subtle yet provocative way, challenging the viewer to reconsider the boundaries between the mundane and the sublime. Number 29. The Dismal Game. 1929. In 1929, Salvador Dalí presented the Lugubrious Game, a work that reflects the transition of his style from Impressionism to pure Surrealism. This oil on canvas captures the psychological complexity of its creator, combining elements of eroticism, anxiety, and obsession with death. The title suggests a contrast between the entertainment involved in a game and the emotional charge carried by the word, lugubrious, a dichotomy that permeates the entire composition. The painting is characterized by its extraordinary level of detail, which contrasts with the dreamlike atmosphere that dominates the scene. The fragmented bodies and ambiguous figures are depicted with almost photographic precision, while the desolate and surreal landscape reinforces the atmosphere of unreality. This work introduces some of the recurring elements in Dalí's art, such as soft clocks and biomorphic forms, which would later become emblems of his style. In historical context, 1929 was a pivotal year for Dalí, as he consolidated his position in the Surrealist group led by André Breton. The lugubrious play reflects this stage of exploration and experimentation, where the subconscious and dreams became the main sources of inspiration. The work not only exemplifies the principles of surrealism, but also anticipates the direction that Dali's career would take in the following decades. An interesting detail is how this work, although deeply personal, invites the viewer to project their own emotions and meanings. The ambiguity of the figures and the open symbolism allow for multiple interpretations, which reinforces its relevance within the surrealist movement and in art history. Number 28. Lobster Telephone, 1936. At the height of surrealism, Salvador Dalí created one of his most iconic works in 1936, Lobster Telephone. This object, which combines a conventional telephone with a sculpted lobster, is a perfect example of the surrealist object that seeks to unite seemingly incongruous elements to provoke an emotional or intellectual reaction. The choice of the lobster was not accidental, since for Dalí it symbolized both desire and danger, two recurring themes in his work. Technically, this piece stands out for its conceptual simplicity and its ability to convey symbolic complexity. The lobster, placed on the telephone receiver, transforms an everyday object into something disconcerting and loaded with meaning. At the same time, the contrast between the utilitarian and the surreal challenges the viewer to question the functionality and purpose of art in everyday life. Historically, Lobster Telephone represents a collaboration between Dalí and Edward James, a major patron of the surrealist movement. This work, along with others in the series, established Dalí as a central figure of surrealism and demonstrated his ability to transcend the boundaries of painting and delve into design and sculpture. A curious detail is how this seemingly simple object has become a cultural icon, representing the essence of surrealism and Dalí's ability to transform the ordinary into the extraordinary. The work remains a reminder of the power of art to challenge our perceptions and redefine reality. Number 27. Portrait of Luis Buu, 1924. In 1924, Salvador Dalí painted a portrait of his friend and collaborator Luis Buu, the celebrated Spanish filmmaker. Created during the early years of Dalí's career, this work combines the influence of Impressionism with a touch of symbolism that anticipates his transition to surrealism. The portrait captures the intensity and enigmatic character of Buu, reflecting not only his personality but also the deep friendship and collaboration between the two artists. The portrait is notable for its warm color palette and focus on facial details, which convey Buñuel's intellectual strength. Unlike Dalí's later works, this painting retains a more traditional style, but with hints of experimentation in composition and use of light. The simple but evocative background allows the central figure to be the absolute focus of the work. In historical context, this painting is a testament to the relationship between Dalí and Buñuel, which would later lead to collaborations such as the film Un Chien Andalou. This portrait not only celebrates Buñuel as an individual, but also symbolizes the intersection of art and cinema at a crucial moment in European cultural history. What is interesting about this work is how, despite its relatively conventional style, it reveals Dalí's budding genius and his ability to capture the essence of his subjects while hinting at the bold innovations that would define his career. Number 26. The Madonna of Port Lagot, 1949. In 1949, Salvador Dalí presented the Madonna of Port Lagot, a surrealist reinterpretation of the Virgin Mary and the Christ Child that combines traditional spirituality with a deeply personal and modern vision. The work, which takes its name from the coastal town where Dalí lived much of his life, represents a high point in his exploration of nuclear mysticism, a theory that combined religion, science, and art. The painting is technically impressive, with a level of detail that reflects the influence of Renaissance masters on Dalí's work. The figure of the Virgin, placed in an environment that seems suspended between reality and dream, is surrounded by symbolic elements such as seashells and geometric shapes that suggest the interconnection between the divine and the earthly. The carefully balanced composition guides the viewer's gaze towards the face of the Virgin, conveying a sense of peace and transcendence. In the context of Dalí's career, the Madonna of Port Lagot represents a significant shift towards religious themes, influenced by his return to Catholicism in the years following World War II. This work, along with others in the same series, cemented his reputation as an artist capable of fusing the ancient and the modern in a unique and provocative vision. A fascinating fact is how Dalí used his wife, Gala, as a model for the Madonna, which adds a personal dimension to this deeply spiritual work. Through this painting, Dalí not only paid homage to his faith, but also offered a completely new interpretation of a classical subject, challenging expectations and expanding the boundaries of religious art. Number 25. Girl at the Window, 1925. In 1925 AD, Salvador Dalí created one of his most iconic and personal works, Girl at the Window. This oil on canvas depicts his sister Anna Maria contemplating the landscape of Cadaqués from an open window. The work, created during the 20th century, reflects the artist's emotional connection with his surroundings, a recurring element in his early work. This period of his career was influenced by the realist style and serenity of the landscapes that surrounded his home in Catalonia. The simplicity of the composition and the masterful use of light and shadow evoke an intimate, almost melancholic atmosphere, which contrasts with the complexities that would mark his later work. Technically, the work shows great precision in detail, particularly in the folds of the clothing and in the texture of the wood of the window. Dalí uses soft, natural tones, highlighting an absolute mastery of chiaroscuro, which gives depth to the scene. The background, representing the sea and the sky, acts as an ideal frame that amplifies the feeling of tranquility and reflection. The female figure is in a profile position, a classic resource that Dalí uses with subtlety to direct attention towards the outside, suggesting a symbolic connection between the character and the world beyond the walls. This work has a special significance in Dalí's career, as it reflects a transitional period in which he explored traditional techniques before delving into the surrealism that would make him world famous. In addition, Girl at the Window not only immortalizes his sister, but also captures a moment in his life in which nostalgia and attachment to his homeland were fundamental. The painting remains an example of how Dalí's beginnings were deeply marked by realism and an almost academic technique. A curious fact about this work is that Salvador Dalí used his real window as a model for the composition, which makes this painting a faithful representation of an intimate and everyday space. Through this detail, the artist allows us to glimpse a direct connection with his personal life, something that contrasts with the dreamlike worlds that would define his work in later years. Number 24. Honey is Sweeter Than Blood, 1927. In 1927 AD, Salvador Dalí created Honey is Sweeter Than Blood, a work that marked a radical change in his style and announced his foray into surrealism. Although the original painting is now lost, there are sketches and testimonies that document its creation and significance. This painting stands out for its provocative title, which reflects Dalí's penchant for the enigmatic and symbolic. The artist was inspired by André Breton's Surrealist Manifesto, which he had read for the first time that same year, which motivated him to explore the mysteries of the subconscious and dreamlike images. The 20th century work combines recognizable elements with abstract figures, creating a disturbing and suggestive composition. Using a warm palette contrasted with dark details, Dalí manages to capture a sense of emotional tension. The loose strokes and rough texture suggest a move away from traditional techniques and a more experimental approach, a characteristic that would define his work in the following years. The presence of organic elements and fragments of human bodies allude to the artist's internal conflict, a recurring theme in his surrealist explorations. Painting was key to Dalí's career, allowing him to establish connections with other surrealist artists and consolidate his artistic identity. This early stage reflects his desire to break with academic conventions and challenge public expectations. Furthermore, the title, loaded with symbolism, can be interpreted as a reflection on the pleasures and sacrifices of life, a theme that would obsess the artist throughout his career. An interesting fact about this work is that Dalí considered it a personal manifesto of his artistic evolution. Although the original canvas was never found, its impact persists thanks to the descriptions and sketches that survive, which underlines the importance of this work in the history of surrealist art. Number 23. Portrait of My Dead Brother. 1963. In 1963 AD, Salvador Dalí presented Portrait of My Dead Brother, one of the most personal and moving works of his career. This oil painting, made at the height of the 20th century, pays tribute to his older brother, also called Salvador, who died a few months after birth. The painting reflects the lasting impact of this loss on the life of the artist, who grew up in the shadow of a brother idealized by his parents. This painting represents not only an emotional introspection, but also an attempt to come to terms with his identity and his past. The composition of the work is complex and disturbing, dominated by a portrait that seems to be made up of multiple symbolic elements. Dalí uses a limited but intense palette, highlighting dark tones and dramatic contrasts that accentuate the solemn character of the piece. The techniques used include a masterful use of pointillism, which creates an optical illusion in which the brother's face merges with other secondary images, such as skeletons and desolate landscapes. In the context of his career, this work is a testament to Dalí's ability to explore deeply personal themes through innovative visual language. Portrait of My Dead Brother stands as a bridge between his surrealist explorations and his interest in science, religion, and metaphysics. The work illustrates how Dalí used art to process complex emotions and existential themes, making it one of the most intimate and meaningful pieces in his catalog. A fascinating detail of this painting is how Dalí incorporates religious and scientific references into a work devoted to a familiar subject. This suggests his multidimensional view of life and death, an approach that distinguishes him as one of the most complex artists of the 20th century. Number 22. Retrospective Bust of a Woman. 1933. In 1933 AD, Salvador Dalí created Retrospective Bust of a Woman, one of the most representative pieces of his foray into three-dimensional art. Although classified as a sculpture, this work combines painting and assemblage techniques, marking a milestone in his exploration of surrealism as a multidimensional movement. The piece, developed in the middle of the 20th century, represents the bust of a woman adorned with extravagant elements such as corn cobs and a loaf of bread, recurring symbols in his work. The sculpture is imbued with Dalí's fascination with memory and desire, themes he explores through the use of everyday objects transformed into haunting symbols. The realistic texture of the bust contrasts with the unusual materials that adorn it, creating a visual tension that challenges the viewer's expectations. The choice of corn and bread as key elements alludes to both Catalan rural culture and the artist's Freudian obsessions, establishing a dialogue between the personal and the universal. In the context of his career, This work established Dalí as an innovator within the surrealist movement, notable for his ability to transcend the boundaries of traditional painting. Retrospective Bust of a Woman is not only a provocative work, but also an early example of the artist's interest in object art and the interaction between the viewer and the piece. A curious fact is that this sculpture was exhibited at the famous International Surrealist Exhibition in Paris, where it caused a great impact among critics and spectators for its conceptual audacity and biting humor, elements that would define Dalí's career. Number 21. Apparatus and Hand. 1927. In 1927 AD, Salvador Dalí created Apparatus and Hand, a work that stands out as a bridge between his academic period and his full embrace of surrealism. This oil-on canvas, executed in the 20th century, combines figurative and abstract elements in a composition that suggests both an anatomical study and a psychological exploration. The painting reflects the artist's interest in the internal mechanisms of the body and mind, an obsession that would lead him to redefine modern art. The work features a dismembered hand that appears to interact with an undefined device, surrounded by a barren and gloomy landscape. Dalí uses earthy tones and precise lines to highlight the anatomical details, while the mechanical elements are represented in a more schematic style. This combination of the organic and the artificial symbolizes the duality between instinct and reason, a theme that the artist would explore throughout his career. In the context of his artistic development, Apparatus and Hand is a key work, as it anticipates the visual and conceptual complexities that would define his surrealist work. The piece demonstrates how Dalí was beginning to experiment with new forms of expression, moving away from academic traditions and embracing the visual language of surrealism. Number 20. Slave Market with the Appearance of the Invisible Bust of Voltaire. 1940. In 1940, in the middle of the 20th century, Salvador Dalí created Slave Market with the Appearance of the Invisible Bust of Voltaire, one of his most complex and symbolic works. This painting, conceived during his most mature surrealist period, masterfully combines optical illusion with a deeply reflective message about freedom and human perception. The work reflects the atmosphere of global tension prior to World War II, a context in which the concept of slavery transcends the historical and becomes symbolic. The face of Voltaire, an Enlightenment philosopher, appears ingeniously in the painting as an ambivalent figure, representing both reason and the limitations of humanity. Dalí used oil on canvas, a medium he mastered with great skill. In this work, warm, earthy tones contrast with deep shadows, creating a three-dimensional sensation that invites the viewer to decipher the multiple figures hidden in the scene. The composition is carefully balanced so that the bust of Voltaire emerges almost imperceptibly among the characters. This technique, known as double image, is a testament to Dalí's fascination with the subconscious and visual perception. The level of detail in the textures and the anatomical precision of the figures are evidence of the artist's technical mastery. This work occupies a crucial place in Dalí's career, as it represents his quest to integrate historical, philosophical, and psychological elements into art. The use of Voltaire not only pays homage to critical thinking, but also underlines the paradox of freedom and slavery, recurring themes in Dalí's work. The painting was received with great interest by the critics of his time, consolidating Dalí as a genius of surrealism. A fascinating curiosity is how the bust of Voltaire seems to change position and expression depending on the angle from which it is observed. This phenomenon makes the work interactive, inviting prolonged and captivating contemplation. Number 19. The Dream. 1931. In 1931, Salvador Dalí created The Dream, a work that exemplifies his interest in the dream world and the mysteries of the subconscious. This painting, created at the height of the surrealist movement, emerges as a visual representation of the psychoanalytic theories of Sigmund Freud, who inspired much of Dalí's work. Set in the context of the interwar period, the work reflects the restlessness and exploration of the boundaries between reality and dream, a central theme in surrealism. Dalí used oil on canvas, creating an ethereal atmosphere by superimposing pastel colors and soft shadows. The floating face, devoid of a physical body, seems suspended in an unreal void. The facial features are distorted, as if subject to the elasticity of dreams. The structures that support the face are a recurring metaphor in Dalí's work, representing the fragility of the human mind and its dependence on external forces to maintain its balance. The work conveys a sense of disquiet and fascination, forcing the viewer to question the nature of perception. The Dream marked a turning point in Dalí's career, consolidating his unique surrealist style and his ability to transform abstract ideas into concrete images. This work is considered one of the most emblematic of his production, noted for its ability to fuse the personal and the universal. Critics praised it for its innovation and psychological depth, securing its place in art history. An intriguing detail of this work is how the closed eyes of the face invite the viewer to reflect on his or her own experience with dreams, turning the painting into a mirror of the collective subconscious. Number 18. Basket of Bread, 1926. In 1926, Salvador Dalí painted Basket of Bread, a seemingly simple work that demonstrates his exceptional technical talent and ability to imbue everyday objects with meaning. Created during a period when Dalí was experimenting with realism, this painting is notable for its meticulous attention to detail and mastery of chiaroscuro. Set against the backdrop of the 1920s, which were marked by significant social and artistic change, this painting stands as a testament to Dalí's ability to transform the banal into high art. The technique used is oil on canvas, with an almost photographic approach in the representation of the texture of the bread and the basket. Soft shadows and precise lights create a three-dimensional effect that makes the objects seem almost tangible. The composition, minimalist and balanced, allows the viewer to focus on the minute details of the work. Every crack in the crust of the bread and every fiber of the basket are rendered with astonishing realism, demonstrating Dalí's technical mastery even in his early artistic stages. Basket of Bread is significant in Dalí's career because it anticipates his later exploration of religious and philosophical themes. Although the work lacks obvious surrealist elements, its simplicity conceals a symbolic depth, suggesting ideas of sustenance, spirituality, and transience. This painting was admired by contemporary artists and critics, who praised its technical virtuosity. A remarkable aspect is how Dalí managed to capture not only the appearance, but also the essence of bread, turning an ordinary object into a symbol of life itself. Number 17. The Endless Enigma, 1938. In 1938, Salvador Dalí presented The Endless Enigma, one of his most enigmatic and symbolic works. Created at a time of global unrest, shortly before the outbreak of World War II, this painting reflects the existential and philosophical concerns of the time. The work depicts a desolate and surreal landscape, filled with superimposed images that seem to emerge from the subconscious. Oil on canvas was the technique employed, allowing Dalí to experiment with depth and texture. The composition is dominated by earthy and gray tones, which convey a sense of melancholy and restlessness. In the painting, multiple hidden figures can be seen, such as faces and bodies, emerging and dissolving into the landscape. This technique, known as double image, is one of Dali's distinctive characteristics and adds a level of visual complexity to the work. The Endless Enigma is a reflection of Dali's interest in psychoanalysis, quantum physics, and philosophy. The work has been the subject of numerous interpretations, from the representation of collective fears to the exploration of identity and perception. This piece consolidated Dalí as one of the most influential artists of surrealism, notable for his ability to combine technique with conceptualization. A captivating observation is how the painting seems to change depending on the viewer's emotional state, becoming a mirror of their own internal enigmas. Number 16. Perpignan Station, 1965. In 1965, Salvador Dalí created Perpignan Station, a work that encapsulates his obsession with science, religion, and geometry. Inspired by a personal experience that the artist described as a cosmic revelation, while observing the Perpignan train station, this painting is a celebration of structure and order in the apparent chaos of the universe. Set against the backdrop of the 1960s, marked by scientific advances and cultural changes, the work reflects Dalí's interest in reconciling spirituality with scientific knowledge. Oil on canvas, Dalí's preferred technique, allowed for precise execution of details. The composition is centered on a cruciform figure, surrounded by fragmented images that seem to orbit around a central axis. Bright colors and dynamic contrasts create a sense of movement and energy. The work combines surrealist elements with references to modern physics, such as atomic theory, and Christian tradition, achieving a balance between the earthly and the transcendental. Perpignan Station is one of Dalí's most ambitious works, encapsulating his artistic and philosophical vision. The painting received both criticism and praise in its time, noted for its bold combination of seemingly disparate concepts. This work cemented Dalí's reputation as a visionary who transcended the limitations of traditional surrealism. A fascinating detail is how the work invites the viewer to find connections between the scattered elements, symbolizing the human search for meaning in a complex and mysterious world. Number 15. The Face of War, 1940. In the historical context of the year 1940, marked by the rise of World War II, Salvador Dalí gave life to the face of war. This work, created in a period of global chaos, captures the horror and devastation that wars bring to humanity. Dalí, a genius of surrealism, uses this painting to express his visceral aversion to conflict and his deep fear for the future of civilization. The work conveys an oppressive feeling that reflects the collective feelings of desolation and hopelessness of that time. Technically, this piece stands out for its use of dark, earthy tones, which envelop the viewer in a gloomy, almost suffocating atmosphere. The central face, which occupies most of the canvas, is marked by an expression of anguish, while its deeply hollow eyes and mouth contain smaller skulls that repeat the same pattern, creating a chilling sense of infinity. This visual device, common in surrealism, manages to fuse metaphor with horror, making this work a visual representation of fear and the inevitability of death. The work occupies a prominent place in Dalí's career, as it represents a shift towards a darker and more reflective approach in his artistic output. Unlike his earlier works, where dreams and subconscious desires predominated, the face of war acts as a mirror of the crueler and more tangible reality. This shift in his style and subject matter solidified his place not only as a master of surrealism, but also as a visual chronicler of his time. A fascinating detail is the painting's symbolic duality. While it depicts universal horror, it also contains a personal warning from Dalí about the dangers of human self-destruction. This message, loaded with meaning, continues to resonate with every viewer who comes face to face with this work, making it a timeless testament to human struggle and suffering. Number 14. The Hallucinogenic Bullfighter. From 1969 to 1970. Created during a period when Salvador Dalí was exploring the combination of classical and surrealist techniques, the hallucinogenic bullfighter is a masterpiece that exemplifies his ability to fuse overlapping realities. Created between 1969 and 1970, this painting reflects Dalí's fascination with Spanish culture, particularly bullfighting, a recurring theme in his work. In the 20th century, the social and artistic context was characterized by increasing experimentation and breaking with traditional molds, something that Dalí mastered with mastery. The work stands out for its technical and compositional complexity. In the center, the face of a bullfighter appears, composed of an optical illusion using a Venus de Milo broken down into geometric shapes and color details. The use of vibrant tones and detailed brushstrokes creates a hypnotic effect, while elements such as the bullfighter's cape and the sand in the ring are transformed into dreamlike landscapes. This display of technical and visual ingenuity demonstrates Dalí's mastery of perspective and the interplay between classical forms and surrealist ideas. This work occupies a crucial place in his career, as it represents a synthesis of his personal obsessions with his cultural heritage and his constant search for new forms of artistic expression. The use of optical illusion, characteristic of this stage, raises the level of interaction between the viewer and the work, requiring careful observation to decipher the multiple levels of meaning. One detail that catches the eye is how Dalí turns the ordinary into the extraordinary by taking elements of popular culture and transforming them into universal symbols. This reinforces his unique ability to capture the sublime and the everyday on a single canvas, leaving each observer with a unique and unrepeatable experience. Number 13. Atomic Leda. 1949. In 1949, Salvador Dalí created Leda Atomica, a work that exemplifies his fascination with science, mythology, and mysticism. Inspired by the Greek myth of Leda and the Swan, this painting is a modern, scientific representation of the classical legend. During this period, Dalí became deeply interested in the advances in atomic physics, which significantly influenced his artistic approach. The result is a work that fuses ancient symbolism with a contemporary view of energy and matter. Technically, the painting is an example of Dalí's obsessive precision. Every element on the canvas seems to float, creating a sense of weightlessness that reflects his concept of nuclear mysticism. Leda, depicted with the features of Dalí's wife and muse Gala, is suspended next to the swan, surrounded by geometric shapes and landscapes that seem to defy the laws of physics. Light and shadow are rendered with an accuracy that gives the scene an almost photographic quality, while the composition balances the tangible and the ethereal. In Dalí's career, Leda Atomica stands out as a work that marks the transition to a more introspective and metaphysical period. Here, Dalí partially abandons pure surrealism to incorporate scientific and religious ideas into his art. This hybrid approach not only expanded his repertoire, but also reaffirmed his position as a visionary ahead of his time. The most intriguing detail of this painting is how Dalí manages to encapsulate the essence of an ancient myth within a modern, almost futuristic visual framework. This unique combination of the archaic and the contemporary continues to defy traditional interpretations, leaving the viewer with an inexhaustible sense of wonder and curiosity. Number 12. Metamorphosis of Narcissus. 1937. In 1937, Amid a global landscape rife with political and cultural tensions, Salvador Dalí painted Metamorphoses of Narcissus. Based on the Greek myth of Narcissus, this work explores obsession, transformation, and self-indulgence. Dalí employs surrealism to reinterpret the classical myth, adding his signature style of symbolic duality and hidden meanings. This period, marked by his artistic maturity, cemented his reputation as one of the great masters of the 20th century. From a technical point of view, the work is a marvel of composition and detail. The canvas presents two central images: Narcissus kneeling by a lake and a hand holding an egg with a flower emerging from inside. Both figures are connected by a visual symmetry that illustrates the theme of transformation. Warm and cool colors blend to create a contrast that highlights the emotional tension of the scene. This play of dualities, characteristic of surrealism, invites the viewer to reflect on perception and identity. This painting is key in Dalí's artistic evolution, as it represents his transition towards a more psychological and philosophical surrealism. Unlike his earlier works, Metamorphoses of Narcissus demonstrates a more structured and theoretical approach, influenced by his studies of Freud and the subconscious. This shift not only broadened his thematic range, but also allowed him to deepen his exploration of the human condition. A captivating fact is how Dalí transforms a well-known myth into a completely new visual experience. Every element of the painting, from the flower to the water, is loaded with symbolism, challenging the viewer to find new meanings in each observation, ensuring its place as an immortal work. Number 11. The Giraffe on Fire. 1937. In the turbulent year of 1937, Salvador Dalí created The Burning Giraffe, a work that encapsulates the fear and anxiety of an era marked by political and social strife. This surreal painting reflects Dalí's pessimistic view of the future, influenced by the impending events of World War II and the rise of totalitarianism. The giraffe, depicted in a desolate landscape, stands as a symbol of warning and hopelessness. From a technical perspective, the painting stands out for its masterful use of color and form. The figure of the giraffe, enveloped in blue and orange flames, contrasts with the dark, empty background, creating a striking visual effect. Furthermore, the human elements in the composition, with distorted bodies and open drawers, evoke a sense of vulnerability and internal decay. This focus on distortion and symbolism showcases Dalí's ability to convey deep emotions through surreal imagery. In the context of his career, this work is pivotal, as it encapsulates the spirit of his time and his transition towards a more political and philosophical style. Through The Giraffe on Fire, Dalí addresses universal themes such as fear, self-destruction, and uncertainty, solidifying his place as a critical observer of the human condition. An interesting detail about this work is how Dalí uses the giraffe, an animal normally associated with calm and majesty, to symbolize chaos and destruction. This duality, present throughout the painting, challenges the viewer's expectations, making it a work that continues to generate interpretations and reflections over time. Number 10. Galatea of the Spheres. 1952. In 1952 AD, Salvador Dalí created Galatea of the Spheres, a work deeply influenced by nuclear physics and his fascination with science. This period of his career was marked by a renewed interest in atomic theories following the devastating events of World War II, in particular the atomic bombs that redefined the perception of matter. Dalí translates this scientific complexity into a visual composition that fragments the human figure into floating spheres, challenging the traditional perception of portraiture. The work depicts Gala, his muse and wife, but its representation transcends the figurative by breaking her down into three-dimensional spheres arranged in a harmonious manner, almost as if they were in orbit. Dalí employs a meticulous technique that combines detailed realism with abstract symbolism, achieving a balance between scientific precision and artistic emotion. The deep blue background evokes a cosmic atmosphere, while the arrangement of the spheres recalls molecular structure, integrating science into art in a pioneering way. In historical context, this work reflects Dalí's transition into his nuclear mystical phase, where he sought to unite science, religion, and art. His exploration of subatomic particles was a visual metaphor to express the fragmentation of reality, a recurring theme in the post-war period. This painting also exemplifies his ability to keep Gala at the center of his artistic narrative, elevating her to an almost divine and timeless figure. A fascinating detail of the work is how it simultaneously conveys a sense of disintegration and cohesion. Each sphere appears to be in motion, forming and deforming Gala's face, forcing the viewer to contemplate the fluidity of matter and identity. This unique approach cements Galatea of the Spheres as one of the most iconic pieces of Dalí's scientific vision. Number 9. The Disintegration of the Persistence of Memory. 1954. Created in 1954 AD, The Disintegration of the Persistence of Memory is a reinterpretation of one of Salvador Dalí's most iconic works, adapted for the scientific context that dominated his interests in the 20th century. In this canvas, Dalí deconstructs his famous 1931 persistence of memory, breaking down the landscape and soft clocks into floating particles that appear to be suspended in a watery space. The technique employed in this work is exceptional, as Dalí combines his surrealist skill with an almost scientific rigor. The soft clocks, a symbol of the relativity of time, are divided into cubes and fragments, as if they were being analyzed under a microscope. The water, which dominates the background, reflects the fluidity of perception and the inevitability of change, a recurring theme in the artist's work. Historically, this work coincides with the growing influence of quantum physics and the theory of relativity, which deeply impacted Dalí's view of reality. His approach combines a sense of destruction with the inherent beauty of chaos. This piece stands out in his career as a clear example of his ability to reinvent past concepts, applying new perspectives to enrich their meaning. A peculiar detail is the inclusion of marine elements, such as fish and water, which seem to contradict gravity and logic. This contradiction highlights Dalí's ability to defy the viewer's expectations, making each observation reveal something new. The disintegration of the persistence of memory symbolizes not only Dalí's artistic advancement, but also his dialogue with the scientific knowledge of his time. Number 8. The Temptation of Saint Anthony. 1946. In 1946 AD, Salvador Dalí presented The Temptation of Saint Anthony, a work created in response to a film competition held in the United States. Although it did not win, this painting is one of the most recognized for its powerful depiction of the mystical and the carnal. Inspired by the biblical story of Saint Anthony, the work encapsulates the spiritual trials the saint faces as he resists earthly temptations. The scene is dominated by long, thin-legged elephants, carrying symbolic objects such as an obelisk and female figures. These stylized and surreal creatures reflect the tension between the earthly and the heavenly. The use of warm and dark colors creates a contrast that underlines the saint's internal struggle, while the desert landscape accentuates his spiritual isolation. In an artistic context, this work stands out for Dalí's ability to integrate religious symbolism with his surrealist style. The central figure of Saint Anthony, almost tiny compared to the immense figures, highlights the magnitude of his faith and his endurance. This painting is a statement about human fragility and strength, a recurring theme in Dali's work. An interesting detail is the ambiguity of the elements, such as the female figures that represent both sin and purity. Dalí manages to encapsulate in this work the complexity of the human experience, making The Temptation of Saint Anthony one of the most emblematic paintings in his repertoire. Number 7. Christ of St. John of the Cross, 1951. In 1951 AD, Salvador Dalí painted Christ of St. John of the Cross, a work that marks his return to religious themes, influenced by mysticism and Catholic tradition. Inspired by a drawing of St. John of the Cross, Dalí presents an innovative vision of the crucifixion, combining realism and symbolism. The almost divine perspective from above offers a unique view of Christ suspended on the cross. The landscape below, with a dark sky and a calm sea, reinforces the contemplative atmosphere of the work. Dalí uses light and shadow masterfully, giving Christ a supernatural luminosity that contrasts with the earthly surroundings. Historically speaking, this work was produced during a period of spiritual renewal in Dalí's life in the 20th century. His intention was to capture not only the suffering of Christ, but also his transcendence and power. This painting is considered one of his masterpieces, both for its technique and for its emotional depth. A captivating detail is the absence of nails or blood on the figure of Christ, which underlines his divinity rather than his humanity. This stylistic choice makes Christ of St. John of the Cross a work that transcends time and connects with the eternal. Number 6. The Great Masturbator, 1929. In 1929 AD, Salvador Dalí created The Great Masturbator, one of his most provocative and personal works. Painted at the height of surrealism, this piece reflects the artist's obsessions with sexuality, the subconscious and internal conflicts. The central face, an amalgam of human and abstract forms, resembles the profile of Dalí himself, suggesting a self-reference loaded with symbolism. The painting is filled with enigmatic images, such as ants, a lion and a female figure, representing desires and fears. The technique employed combines minute details with dreamlike elements, creating an atmosphere of uncertainty and fascination. The use of warm, earthy colors evokes a sense of intimacy and vulnerability, while surreal shapes defy logic. Historically, this work marked a turning point in Dalí's career, consolidating him as one of the most prominent exponents of surrealism in the 20th century. His ability to capture the complexities of the human subconscious set him apart from his contemporaries. An intriguing detail is how Dalí blends the personal and the universal in this work, allowing each viewer to find their own meanings in the images. The Great Masturbator remains a testament to Dalí's genius and his ability to explore the darkest and most fascinating corners of the human mind. Number 5. Soft Construction with Boiled Beans, Premonition of the Civil War, 1936. Created in 1936, in the turbulent context of the 20th century, this work stands as one of Salvador Dalí's most striking pieces. The Spanish Civil War was looming, and surrealist art served as a medium to explore fears, anxieties, and dystopian visions of an uncertain future. The painting, loaded with symbolism, presents an amorphous, almost anthropomorphic structure that seems to be in a process of disintegration. The boiled beans, which contrast with the brutality of the scene, could be interpreted as a symbol of fragility and banality in the face of inevitable violence. From a technical perspective, The work stands out for its masterful use of chiaroscuro, which adds visceral drama to the twisted and fragmented figures. Ochre and gray tones dominate the composition, creating an oppressive atmosphere that reinforces the idea of impending destruction. Dalí employs fluid lines and detailed textures to emphasize the plasticity of the depicted elements, giving them an almost tactile quality that both disconcerts and draws the viewer in. In Dalí's career, this painting marks a crucial point where his surrealist approach began to integrate with a more explicit commentary on the human condition and the socio-political events of his time. Although his earlier works already displayed disturbing elements, this piece is particularly explicit in its message, foreshadowing the suffering and chaos that war would bring. A fascinating fact is that Dalí saw this work as a personal meditation on human frailty, using beans as a symbol of humble nourishment that persists even in times of adversity. The piece remains a powerful reminder of the power of art to capture the essence of a turbulent time and project collective emotions into visual forms that defy time. Number 4. Swans Reflecting Elephants. 1937. Created in 1937, during the 20th century, Swans Reflecting Elephants is an iconic work of surrealism. In it, Salvador Dalí manages to transform a seemingly tranquil scene into a spectacle of optical illusions and profound symbolism. Painted during a period marked by political and social upheaval in Europe, this work reflects an exploration of the subconscious and the duality inherent in human perceptions. The work presents a tranquil landscape with swans floating on a lake, but its true uniqueness lies in how the shapes reflected in the water transform into elephants. This double image technique is one of Dalí's most innovative and distinctive resources. On a technical level, the cool, earthy colors contrast with the precise shapes of the animals and the ethereal textures of the sky. The symmetry of the reflections adds a level of complexity that forces the viewer to look beyond the surface. In the context of his career, this painting consolidates Dalí's ability to fuse traditional techniques with surrealist concepts, challenging the norms of conventional art. The swans, symbols of grace and serenity, contrast with the elephants, which represent strength and endurance. This duality can be interpreted as a commentary on human contradictions and the coexistence of opposing forces within the same reality. An intriguing observation is that Dalí considered this work a reflection on how perceptions change depending on the point of view, an idea deeply influenced by Freudian psychology. This approach makes the painting transcend its time, resonating with those seeking to understand the limits and possibilities of human perception. Number 3. The Elephants. 1948. Completed in 1948, Elephants is a work that encapsulates Salvador Dalí's dreamlike vision and attention to detail. Set against the backdrop of the 20th century, this painting comes in the aftermath of World War II, a time marked by reconstruction and hope, but also uncertainty. Dalí uses the figure of the elephant, which he had already explored in previous works, as a symbol of strength and transcendence. The work stands out for its surreal composition, where the elephants appear with long, thin legs, which contrast with their massive, obelisk-laden bodies. This design, which defies the laws of physics, creates a sense of fragility and precarious balance. The warm colors of the background, evoking an arid landscape, accentuate the atmosphere of a strange and distant dream. For Dalí, elephants symbolized the eternal and the monumental, but the long legs suggested that even the most imposing structures have an unstable foundation. Technically, the work demonstrates his mastery in the use of minute details and distorted perspectives, inviting the viewer to enter a world where ordinary rules do not apply. An interesting detail is that the inspiration for this work comes from Baroque sculpture, particularly Bernini, whose work he deeply admired. This shows how Dalí combined classical influences with his modern vision, producing a synthesis that continues to captivate generations of viewers. Number 2. Dream caused by the flight of a bee around a pomegranate 1 second before awakening. 1944. Painted in 1944, in the middle of the 20th century, this work is a fascinating example of how Salvador Dalí used his dreams as a source of inspiration. In this painting, he combines surreal imagery with a deeply symbolic narrative, evoking the fragility and immediacy of the subconscious. Created during World War II, this painting reflects a longing to escape reality into a world of fantasy and psychological complexity. The main scene shows a naked woman floating in the air, while elements such as tigers, a rifle, and a bee interact around her. Everything seems to emerge from an open grenade, a symbol of explosion and transformation. Dalí's technical precision is evident in the hyperrealistic details of each element, which seem frozen in time. The warm tones and contrasts between light and shadow enhance the drama of the scene. This work represents a culmination of Dalí's studies on the mechanisms of dreams and the subconscious, influenced by Freud's theories. Through this painting, Dalí not only captures dream logic, but also addresses themes such as mortality, desire, and uncertainty. A curiosity is that Dalí created this painting as a tribute to his wife Gala, who appears portrayed in many of his works. The connection between dreams and reality becomes here a bridge that transcends the personal to touch the universal. Number 1. The Persistence of Memory. 1931. Created in 1931, during the 20th century, The Persistence of Memory is perhaps Salvador Dalí's most iconic work. Painted in a context marked by scientific advances and social changes of the time, this piece reflects an exploration of time, perception, and the transience of existence. The work features soft clocks that seem to melt against a desolate landscape, accompanied by a mountainous background inspired by the surroundings of Lagot, where Dalí lived. The contrast between the static nature of the landscape and the fluidity of the clocks creates a visual tension that invites introspection. Warm tones and meticulous details enhance the surreal atmosphere, while the presence of ants and other natural elements adds a layer of symbolism about decay and the passage of time. This painting marked a turning point in his career, consolidating him as one of the most influential exponents of surrealism. Dalí used this work to express his interest in scientific theories of time, including Einstein's ideas on relativity, and how these transformed human understanding of the universe. An intriguing observation is that Dalí referred to soft watches as camembert cheeses in the sun, a humorous metaphor that encapsulates his irreverent and deeply creative approach to life's most momentous issues. This work remains a cultural icon that transcends borders and generations. Thank you for watching our video. Subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. Give it a like, comment your thoughts, and share this video with your friends and family.